I will never forget that Christmas morning. I had just poured myself a cup of hot coffee when the phone rang, and my son's name, Mark Briggs, lit up the screen. I smiled at first. I thought he was calling to wish me a Merry Christmas. But his voice was cold. Cold the way winter wind sweeps across the ridges of Flagstaff, sharp, distant, without pause. Dad, I need you to watch the kids for a few days. We're heading out. You're retired anyway. You don't do anything. I froze. No Merry Christmas. No. How are you? Dad. Not even a breath between his words. And before I could form a single thought, he stabbed in one more line. A line a father should never hear from the child he raised. You're useless. Just take them. I stood there in my kitchen cup, still in hand, steam drifting up into my face like it was trying to keep me standing. Useless. I was a man who'd hauled brothers out of burning Humvees, a man who built this house board by board with the paychecks of 3 deployments, a man who raised him alone after my wife's illness took the best of our years. But at that moment, I was just useless. Before I could breathe, before I could steady myself, I heard a car engine outside. The front door opened without knocking. Hannah, Mark's wife, walked in like she owned the place. The kids came in behind her. Evan with his headphones on, Lily refusing to meet my eyes, and little Rowan dragging a small suitcase that thumped across the floorboards. Hannah set a printed schedule on the counter. "We're busy," she said. 4 words. Dry as a command. No thank you, no apology. Nothing that even faintly resembled respect for me or for the man she claimed as her husband. She turned to leave. And that was when I saw it, the thing that froze the deepest part of me. She didn't get into Mark's SUV. She stepped into another one. The man behind the wheel wasn't my son. My name is Earl Simmons, 67 years old Army veteran. And in that instant, I understood something Mark didn't. My son wasn't just leaving his children with me. He was losing his entire family, and he didn't even see it happening. Before I go on, I know you're listening to this maybe while driving to work, washing dishes, or lying in the dark hoping sleep will come soon. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what time it is where you are. And if this story touches something familiar in you, don't leave. Like, share, and subscribe, because trust me, you're going to want to hear how that Christmas ended in ways Mark never saw coming. And that is where my story begins. But it doesn't end there. That Christmas pulled me into a long, dark stretch of days I never expected, secrets spilled open. Children found truths they were never meant to witness, and a man like me was forced to stand up one last time in his life. Flagstaff, November 28, 2025. The morning was so cold my breath turned to mist with each inhale. First snow had settled across the roof like someone had laid a thin white cloth in silence. I stood on my porch, a 67-year-old man, leather-bound journal in hand, the one Carol gave me during her last winter. The pages still smelled faintly of dry pine. That smell pulled me back to the day everything began. December 24, 2024. Nearly a year had passed, but if I closed my eyes I could still hear it, the violent whistle of wind squeezing through the door frame, the ticking of the old space heater in my garage, and the phone call that split my life in two. That morning I was in the garage cleaning my tools. The smell of hot oil, old metal, faint radio chatter from the military station. It was peaceful in a way that reminded me of standing guard at dawn in Afghanistan decades ago. Then my phone buzzed. Mark Briggs. My son. I thought foolishly that he was calling to say Merry Christmas. But when I answered, what hit my ear wasn't warmth. Not the voice of the little boy who rode on my shoulders for 3 straight summers. It was a blade. "Dad, you're free anyway. Watch the kids a few days. We're flying out tonight." I stiffened. "Where are you going?" No answer. Just more impatience. His voice clipped, rushed like I was an obstacle he needed out of the way. "You don't do anything. I need you to watch them." That's it. Then came the blow as direct and cruel as any shrapnel I'd taken overseas. "You're useless." In that moment, sound dropped out of the world. I couldn't hear the snow falling. I couldn't hear the radio. I couldn't hear anything except that one sentence drilling into me. I have survived artillery fire. I have watched comrades fall beside me, but I had never felt my heart lose its air like that. At that exact moment, the screen door creaked. My neighbor Marge Keller was walking up with a box of Christmas waffle cookies, the kind she brought every year, and she heard him, every word. She set the box down, tilted her head, and looked at me with a softness I had never seen from her. "He shouldn't talk to you like that, Earl." I nodded. That small, tight nod older men use when they're hurting, but refuse to let their hands tremble. "He's stressed, Marge. People say things when they're stretched thin." But she kept looking at me long enough to let me know she didn't believe it. And truth be told, neither did I. Something was wrong with Mark. I could hear it in the weight behind his breath, in the way he snapped every time I asked if he was okay, in the way he seemed to be choking on something he couldn't say or wouldn't say. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked again, "Mark, are you sure everything's all right?" No answer, just a sharp inhale, and then the call cut off midway through his sentence. "Dad, there's something I need to beep. Beep." He hung up. Not a bad signal, not an accident. He ended it. I stood there a long time, long enough for my coffee to cool, long enough for Marge to return and ask Earl, "You okay?" I wasn't sure. But I knew this. That call wasn't about babysitting. It was the first warning of a storm gathering behind my son's life. I set my hand on the wooden railing, looking at the fine cracks in the boards. Cracks I once repaired myself. They looked exactly like Mark's voice that morning, thin but deep, small but splitting from the inside. Something was wrong, badly wrong. And whatever it was coming for all of us, as surely as the cold wind rolling down from the San Francisco peaks. I didn't know then that later that afternoon, when Hannah drove up to my house, I would see something that made the phone call make perfect sense. I didn't know that the kids stepping into my home with tired eyes and heavy silence would be the start of the darkest weekend of their lives. And I didn't know, not yet, that Mark's entire family had been standing at the edge of a cliff for years, waiting for one wrong breath to send them over. But I did know one thing, that Christmas changed my life forever. December 24th, 2024. The sky over Flagstaff carried the steel-gray shade of a knife dipped in cold water. No cars passing, no kids playing in driveways. Just the wind sliding through the pines, bringing with it the scent of a snowstorm trapped somewhere behind the mountain ridge. I was standing at the stove heating a pot of water. I meant to make the stew Carol used to cook every Christmas. Not because I expected anyone to join me, but because habits keep an old house alive, even when the man living in it is running out of reasons to. Then I heard the crunch of tires on crushed gravel. That sound wasn't Mark's Ford. It was lighter, thinner, hurried. I looked through the window. Hannah Briggs stepped out first. She always walked like someone stepping on other people's time, fast, cold, never once looking back. Today was no different. No Merry Christmas, no polite nod, not a single sign that she recognized me as a man who'd lived more winters than she'd lived years. Just a car door slamming, and 3 children being dropped off like living luggage. Evan stepped out first, eyes glued to his phone, headphones buried deep, the kind of deep that makes you wonder if he'd noticed the earth splitting open. Lily followed, wrapped in a stylish coat face blank as glass. Rowan, smallest of the 3, dragged a suitcase that squealed against the snow like a guitar string about to snap. I opened the door, but Hannah didn't wait. She shoved a printed packet into my hand. "We're busy. You're free. Keep them." Her voice had no subject, no emotion, no effort to acknowledge who I was. I looked down at the stacked feeding schedules, sleep charts, allergy notes, emergency contacts, a script for me to follow as their unpaid babysitter, as if my life existed around their convenience. I asked quietly, "Where's Mark?" Hannah gave a little lift of her lip, not a smile, but the kind of expression people use to cover what they don't want to reveal. He's busy. Busy. One word. Sharper than anything Mark had thrown at me that morning. She turned. No hug for her kids. No reminder to behave. No question about whether I was well prepared or even willing. Just a pivot of her heel as if leaving her children with me had been agreed upon by everyone, except me. I stood on the threshold watching the kids step inside, each carrying a different kind of cold. Evan, the cold of indifference. Lily, the cold of irritation. Rowan, the cold of fear. I reached to close the door when the doorbell camera chimed softly. I glanced at the small screen mounted beside the frame, an old habit from years in the service, never ignoring movement at my door. And that was when I saw something I still feel in my chest when I think about it. Hannah didn't get back into the car she came in. She walked toward a black SUV parked behind it. The driver's door opened. A man, broad shoulders, watch catching the light, reached out to take her hand. She smiled. Not the polite holiday smile you offer out of habit, but the smile someone wears when stepping into a world where no one expects anything of them. No husband, no children, no responsibility, and certainly no father-in-law. She slipped her arm through his. They got into the SUV, the door closed. The engine started, and they drove away without hesitation. Just a few seconds, but enough to deliver a truth colder than any wind rolling off the San Francisco peaks. Hannah wasn't with Mark, and Mark wasn't with her. Those two weren't escaping together. They were running in opposite directions and using me as the drop-off point for the weight they didn't want to carry. I stared at the doorbell screen a long moment, unmoving. I've seen many things in my life. Betrayal, cowardice, people running from their own mess, but rarely all three wrapped together so cleanly, so quickly. A small tug on my sleeve broke the silence. Rowan, Grandpa, where do we put our bags? His voice was so soft it nearly dissolved into the cold air. I knelt down, tightening the scarf around his neck. Just leave them there, Rowan. This house will always have room for you. He nodded, but his eyes didn't smile. None of their eyes did. Evan walked straight into the living room like it was a hotel lobby. Lily dropped her coat on a chair as if daring gravity to handle the rest. Rowan stayed beside me, smaller than any child his age should look. Hannah had dropped those kids into my home like old boxes shoved into storage. But I'd been a soldier long enough to know one thing. Whatever people try to bury always finds its way back up. And that frozen Christmas afternoon, as I watched snow swallow the path to my front porch, I knew something, with the weight of a storm, was on its way. The storm hadn't begun. It had only opened the door. Christmas night. My house had always known silence, but that night it was a different kind of silence. Thick, heavy, the way fog clings to the window when a blizzard is waiting just beyond the ridgeline. I lifted the lid off the pot on the stove. Steam rose into the dim kitchen light, carrying the scent of chicken stock and dried oregano, the scent Carol left behind in every Christmas meal she ever touched. I tasted a small spoonful. Still the same, still warm, still the flavor of 30 winters. But this year, there was no one beside me to tell me it needed more salt or that I'd put in too much celery again. Evan walked in first. He didn't take off his headphones, didn't look at me, didn't look at the food. He just sat down, a silent shape bigger than his 15 years. I placed the bowl of soup in front of him. He leaned in, sniffed it once, and his face tightened as if I'd placed something ancient and strange in front of him. Smells old. 2 words. But he said them like he wanted to erase the effort I'd put in, or prove he didn't need anything from me. Lily came next. She didn't even sit at the table. She reached into her backpack, tore open a bag of chips with a sharp rip, a sound so sudden I felt my hand tighten around the spoon. I kept my voice steady. Lily, it's better when it's hot. Soup loses flavor when it cools. She didn't look at me. I'm not hungry. but her hand kept reaching into the bag, one chip after another. Rowan, the youngest, sat across from me. He rested both hands on the warm bowl eyes, watching me longer and deeper than I expected. "Daddy said you don't know how to take care of anyone." He said it like he was reciting something taught to him. A line repeated, not understood. I didn't look away. Couldn't. Not because I'm the adult, but because I spent years teaching soldiers how to look truth in the eye even when it hurt like hell. Rowan. I fed an entire squad for months. 12 men ate what I cooked. None of them starved. None got sick. If I could keep a squad alive, I can take care of you three. He didn't answer, just took a small spoonful. But his eyes, they questioned everything he'd been told. He didn't understand the whole picture, but he understood enough. When I stepped away from the table to clean up, Evan didn't move. He stared at his bowl as if trying to make sense of something no one dared say out loud. I turned on the sink. The sound of hot water hitting cold metal was sharp, like wind scraping against rock. While I scrubbed the pot, I heard a small ping, a sound too soft for the kids to notice, but loud enough to snap me upright. Evan's iPad sat on the table. The screen lit up. Family sharing photos synced. Phoenix Resort, 12/24. Phoenix Resort, December 24th. The day Mark said he was busy with work. And now? Photos. I'm not a man who digs for secrets. But a soldier learns when the truth knocks, you don't turn your back on it. One photo opened by itself. Clear, bright. The golden lobby lights of a resort. A large suitcase stood next to a man's legs only visible from the waist down. New khaki pants. Polished leather shoes, a wristwatch glinting in the light. Mark didn't own shoes like that. Mark didn't pack like that. Mark didn't dress like that. Before I could react, Evan walked back into the kitchen. He saw the glowing screen. He saw my eyes shift toward it, and he lunged for it faster than I'd ever seen him move. "Don't look." His voice didn't sound angry. It sounded frightened. Frightened of what that photo meant. I looked at him, not judging, not accusing. "I didn't see anything, Evan. I just heard the alert." But I saw his hands shake as he grabbed the tablet. Not because I'd seen the photo, but because he had. Because he knew that picture didn't belong to a normal family Christmas. He hugged the iPad to his chest, as if he could shield the entire house from a truth too heavy for him. He turned to leave, but he paused. Just half a second. But that half second told me everything. Evan suspected something. And that suspicion was far too big for a 15-year-old. I went back to the sink. The soft clink of metal on porcelain echoed like the slow, patient countdown of a man who'd learned to expect the worst long before it happened. Lily passed through the kitchen. Didn't look at anyone. Didn't speak. But in the corner of her eye there was something, a flicker of doubt hiding behind a mask she wasn't old enough to hold up. Rowan ran to me and wrapped his arms around my leg. "Grandpa." I ate almost all of it. "Okay." I crouched, brushing his hair gently. "It's okay, Rowan. You did good." He smiled, but only with his mouth, not with his eyes. I stood and looked toward the window. Snow was falling harder now, the sky dimming as if someone had turned down the lights on the whole mountain. Our Christmas dinner that year wasn't eaten, but it gave me something else, something sharper than a blade, heavier than iron, truer than any excuse the adults in their lives had ever offered. The truth was breaking through, piece by piece, layer by layer, child by child. Evan knew something was wrong. Lily knew something was wrong. Rowan felt something was wrong. And I knew that night was only the first night of a Christmas none of us would ever forget. Christmas morning, December 25th. But inside my house it didn't feel like Christmas. No music, no smell of baked pastries, no laughter, just the gray light of a Flagstaff winter pressing through fogged-over glass, and that pale blue-white daylight that looks like it would rather stay asleep. I woke at 5 a.m., not because of an alarm, but because of that old instinct soldiers never outgrow. The instinct that once told me a pair of footsteps in the dark might mean life or death. The kids were still asleep. The house was quiet, not peaceful quiet, but the quiet of strangers trying to share a space without knowing where to put their feelings. I opened the cupboards, took out the flour and the eggs, and began making pancakes. Carol used to make pancakes every Christmas morning, no matter how deep the snow got. I can still hear her teasing voice as she slid the first one onto my plate. For my old soldier, keep your strength up. That was the one tradition I refused to let die. Evan was the first to appear. He walked out of the guest room like a man carrying years he hadn't lived yet. Headphones on. Phone in hand, a mask he used to hide whatever he refused to feel. I placed a plate in front of him. He sniffed it, then said, "Smells old." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't meant to hurt. It was the voice of the boy who'd learned to treat anything homemade as something outdated, something from a world he wanted to outrun. I didn't answer. Not because I'm used to taking hits, but because boys like Evan aren't rude out of malice. They're rude because they don't know how to express their exhaustion. Lily came down the stairs next. Hair messy, jacket barely on her shoulders, eyes heavy from a night of bad sleep. She glanced at the pancakes, then opened a drawer and pulled out the chips she'd been eating the night before. "It doesn't look like the ones from the restaurant," she said, not bothering to look up. She said it like a reflex, like in her home, anything made by hand was automatically less than something bought. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not from cold. From lack of rest. "I don't know how to make restaurant style," I replied, my voice gentle, but not apologizing. Rowan came in last. He tried to bring some Christmas energy with him, but his eyes betrayed him, red tired like he'd cried the night before and slept in short pieces. He sat down quietly, and then he asked Grandpa, "Is Dad mad at you?" The question sliced through the kitchen like a thin blade straight into the years of silence between Mark and me. I set down the pan and knelt so I could look him in the eyes. "Why do you think that, buddy?" He bit his lip. "Last night, I saw Mom and Dad fighting. Mommy was crying. Daddy slammed the door. And then Mommy said, they didn't need to take us with them because we'd just make everything harder." His head lowered. His breath was small, the sound of something fragile trying not to break. Children don't lie like this. They say what they see. And Rowan had seen too much. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rowan, none of that is your fault. And no, your dad isn't mad at me. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was the truth the 7-year-old needed." Behind us, Evan leaned against the doorway. He didn't interfere, didn't cut in, didn't deny what his little brother said. His silence told me more than any words could. Lily wandered around the living room. She'd never cared about the photos on my walls before, but this morning she touched each frame carefully as if searching for clues. She stopped in front of a picture of Mark at 8 years old, sitting on my shoulders, laughing so hard his head tilted back, his hands wrapped around my forehead. "Is that my dad?" Her voice was small, but not cold this time. "Yes," I said. "That was him. Back then he didn't know where the sun rose, but he could laugh louder than anyone." Lily studied the picture a long time. Too long. As if she was trying to force the boy in the photo to match the man she knew now, but couldn't. "Dad used to be like that." "He was a good kid," I said quietly. "A very good kid." She didn't speak again, but her eyes were a little red when she turned away. The kids drifted back into the living room. I stayed alone in the kitchen, watching steam rise from 3 plates in the pale morning light. The silence in the house had shifted, changed. It wasn't heavy in the same way anymore. It was cracking. I rinsed the dishes. The sound of hot water hitting metal echoed like rain on desert sand. And then a small but important thing happened. Rowan came back. He tugged lightly at the hem of my shirt. "Grandpa, last night when I woke up to get water, Mom and Dad were fighting. Fighting? I asked softly. He nodded. A slow, heavy nod that made the kitchen suddenly feel colder. I saw Mommy push Daddy, and Daddy hit the door, and Mommy said, "Someone was waiting." I straightened up, said nothing for several seconds. Outside, snow kept falling, but inside me something froze solid. The kids hadn't been dropped off for a holiday trip. They'd been abandoned in the middle of a war zone they never should have witnessed. Evan, Lily, Rowan, each of them in their own way had handed me pieces of a puzzle I hadn't been able to see yesterday. And every piece pointed to one truth: Mark and Hannah's marriage had already collapsed. Long before this Christmas. And their Phoenix trip wasn't a getaway. It was an escape. I wiped my hands on an old kitchen towel. A cold feeling crawled along my spine. Not the cold of winter. The cold of a truth about to surface. That breakfast, the pancakes, the questions, the small voices breaking through was the first real sign. I didn't know where things were headed yet, but I knew one thing. From that moment on, I wasn't just babysitting. I'd stepped into the center of a family secret that the kids understood far better than any adult. Christmas afternoon has a strange kind of stillness. Not because of sunlight, not because of church bells, but because the world seems to slow down just enough for you to hear the one thing you're most afraid of. Inside my home, the silence of the children felt thick, like the gunpowder smoke that never clears in an underground bunker. Lily sat with a book open on her lap, but her eyes didn't follow a single line. Rowan lay on the carpet rolling a toy car back and forth but never sending it anywhere. And Evan avoided my eyes from the moment he woke up. Not the stubborn teenage kind of avoidance. No, this was the kind of avoidance children use when they're holding on to a secret that's about to split their chest open. Around 11:45 a.m., Evan set his phone down and inhaled sharply. "Grandpa, I need to do robotics. Can I borrow your laptop?" His voice wasn't the voice he used yesterday, not mocking, not dismissive, just stretched thin. So thin I knew something was coming. I handed him my old laptop, the aluminum-cased machine with worn edges, the one Mark had used to sort tax papers 3 weeks ago. And Mark, like always, never signed out of his email. Or his iMessage. I turned to the sink washing dishes. The steam rose like early morning desert mist. I heard the keyboard click a few times. Then stop. Not ordinary silence. The silence that happens when time freezes right before your life changes. I turned around. Evan was frozen in front of the screen, hands suspended midair. On the laptop screen was a hotel booking confirmation: Phoenix Desert Resort 2 adults, December 24th at 26, guest Hannah Briggs. Evan stared at the line 2 adults so long I thought the light from the screen would burn into his eyes. Before I could speak, another sound chimed, a soft ping. iMessage. Automatically syncing. A message popped up immediately. Sender Devin Hayes. Text room looks great. Can't wait for tonight. 3 lines. Only 3, but enough to shatter a 15-year-old boy. I watched Evan's face drain of all color as if he'd walked straight off a battlefield. His eyes didn't blink, didn't move, didn't breathe. "Evan?" I spoke softly, barely above a whisper. Too late. He slammed the laptop shut. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a rifle shot. Not anger, not rebellion. It was the sound of a child breaking. Don't look at that." His voice shook the way a body shakes after too long in the cold. I took a step forward. He stepped back like the ground beneath him had just split open. You can't tell Lily. You can't tell Rowan. You can't tell anyone." I raised both hands, not touching him. "Evan, I won't say a word. I promise." He shook his head violently, hair falling over half his face. "I don't want to know. I don't want to see this. Not today. Not." His voice cracked mid-sentence like a guitar string stretched past its limit. I stood 3 steps away, the safe distance for a heart splitting open. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said calmly. Evan clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. "I don't want to believe my mom." He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't force the word cheating past his lips. He stared at the floor, his shoes shaking with each heavy breath. "Grandpa," his voice dropped to a level that didn't belong to a boy his age. I knew they fought, but I didn't think it was like this. I didn't lie to him. I didn't say everything will be okay. I've seen too many military families torn apart to ever say that. I know the truth doesn't always settle. Sometimes it explodes and leaves pieces sharp enough to hurt for years. I only said, "I know this is hard, but you're not the one who caused it." Evan bit his lip. He swallowed a breath so heavy it seemed to lift his shoulders and drop them again. Then he closed the laptop gently, so gently it felt like the opposite of the slam from moments ago. "Please," he whispered, "don't say anything. Don't do anything today. I can't handle it yet." I nodded once. "I understand." He turned and walked toward the living room. I heard his breath tremble as he pulled the door closed, not slamming, not angry, just closing it slowly, like he was trying to keep his world from collapsing. The laptop screen was still glowing on the counter. Its light reflected off the metal sink, harsh cold like broken diamond. One email, one text, one stranger's name. And in that moment I realized something even heavier. Evan wasn't just shocked. He had known or suspected something was wrong long before today, and he had been pretending not to know to protect his siblings and himself. Kids always know first. Always. Adults just refuse to look. I closed the laptop. My hand rested on its cold surface the same way a soldier rests a hand on a piece of shrapnel pulled from a blast site. No one wants to look at truth like that, but once it's exposed, it never goes back into the dark. Morning of December 26th. Flagstaff was brighter than the day before, but the cold had sharpened. The kind of cold that cuts through coats, through skin, through thoughts that haven't even fully formed. I woke earlier than Evan for once. Last night the house held the kind of silence where someone is crying quietly behind a closed door. I heard Evan's heavy breathing through the wall, heard Lily tossing and turning, heard Rowan whispering something into his blanket. None of them slept well. None of them were pretending to be okay anymore. I brewed coffee, the steam rising like battlefield fog, because I needed clarity. What I'd seen yesterday was only the tip of a very large iceberg. After a simple breakfast, I gathered the trash and carried each bag out to the big bin beside the garage. As I lifted the last bag, something caught my eye, a folded paper stained slightly with food crumbs, a printed receipt. From Phoenix Desert Resort. I unfolded it. The words were sharp, cold. Phoenix Desert Resort, December 24th. Charge, $820. Card, declined. Insufficient funds. Overdraft fee applied. A declined card. An overdraft. A reattempt with a different card. Itemized below. Cocktails, X4. Room service, X2 spa package. Couple. I stood there for a long time. The cold from the paper seeped straight into my palm. Mark had never let his card overdraft. Not even during the hardest years. Not once. He would never spend $820 on a couple's spa with Hannah. And if the two of them had been in Phoenix together, why did the booking list 2 adults but only show Hannah's name? A chill slid down my spine. Nothing about this was right. Not from the roots. The door next door opened. Tommy Hill, retired aerospace engineer, 72, and the kind of man who knew everything happening in the neighborhood without ever meaning to, stepped onto his porch with a thermos of tea. "Earl," he called, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you since yesterday." I walked to the fence. Tommy glanced around, lowered his voice. "On the night of the 24th, I was in Phoenix visiting my sister. I saw Hannah in the parking lot of that resort. My breath paused for a beat. With who, I asked plainly. Tommy didn't answer right away. He squinted, replaying it in his mind. She was arguing with a man. Not Mark. Tall guy, brown hair, wearing a sports watch. Loud voice. They pulled toward a white SUV. She was crying, telling him, "Mark doesn't know anything. Let me handle it." That last sentence hit me like a stone dropped into a deep well. The echo ran all the way down. Tommy continued. It wasn't a normal married couple argument. You've seen enough of those to know. This was something else. I nodded, thanked him, said nothing more. I didn't need more words. The truth was sitting right in my hands. Mark hadn't been in Phoenix with his wife. Hannah had been there, with someone else. And they were hiding something bigger, something the kids had already sensed long before any adult admitted it. I turned toward the house. Before I reached the door, Rowan burst out onto the porch, waving the toy car I'd repaired the night before, new front wheel, tightened axle. Grandpa. It works again. You fixed it? He raced in a little circle, laughing, then stopped right in front of me, face glowing with the kind of joy children rarely get in a home full of shouting. Grandpa, Rowan said softly, suddenly serious. At our house, nobody fixes anything. They just yell. He said it gently, as if he were stating tomorrow's weather. But inside those words I heard every memory of slammed doors, broken dishes, and arguments muffled behind hallways. I knelt, resting my hand on his head. No yelling here, I told him. He nodded and ran back inside, holding the toy car like it was precious. Through the window I saw Lily's silhouette. She was standing in the living room, hands clasped together, staring out the glass. Not crying, but clearly trying to piece together events in her head. And Evan. His bedroom door stayed shut. No noise, no anger. And that worried me more than anything. I stood on the porch watching those 3 children trying to survive things they didn't understand. And in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Hannah wasn't just having an affair. She was setting something up, and Mark had no idea. I looked down at the receipt again. Numbers don't lie. Itemized charges don't soften the truth. Small, overlooked details carry the weight of what adults think children won't notice. But I noticed. And the kids were starting to notice, too. I tore off a corner of the receipt and slid it into the old leather notebook I keep by my bed, the same notebook I once used for field intel overseas. Now it would hold another kind of intel. Not for a war fought abroad, but for a war to protect 3 children from a life being quietly shattered by the lies of their own parents. And I, the man their father had called useless, would be the one to make the first move. Evening of December 26th. The house was wrapped in the dim amber glow of Carol's old table lamp. I had just set a bowl of soup on the table when Lily walked down the stairs slowly, one step at a time, as if each step carried a hidden weight. Her face was pale, rigid, and most of all, afraid. Not afraid of me, not afraid of the house, afraid of something she'd been outrunning for years. Lily sat at the table without a word. Evan stayed locked in his room. Rowan had fallen asleep on the couch, hugging his toy car. I asked gently, "Can you eat, sweetheart?" Lily shook her head, a thin, fragile shake, the kind that told me tonight would not be like other nights. She stared at the table for a long moment, then whispered, "Grandpa, does my mom love my dad? Like, really love him?" I didn't answer right away. If I said yes, I'd be lying. If I said no, I would shatter the last pillar she was clinging to. So I asked, "Why do you ask that?" Lily bit her lower lip until it turned red. "Last night, I heard her on the phone. She was laughing. But not the way she laughs with Dad. And she said things I don't think she would ever say to someone in our family. I stayed silent. Sometimes silence gives a child permission to keep speaking. Her voice trembled thin as cold metal. I remember when Mom used to hug me, ask what I wanted. But for a long time now, she just looks past me like I'm not even there. Her fingers twisted together, rubbing knuckle against knuckle in a restless, painful loop. Grandpa, I'm scared. Dad is scared too. Our family is coming apart like a box with the lid ripped open. I placed my hand on the table, not touching her, but close enough for her to feel she wasn't alone. Lily, you can tell me anything. She looked up, eyes shining, but not a single tear fell. Grandpa, Mom didn't go with Dad, did she? The truth stood behind her question, cold as a shadow in a dark hallway. Before I could speak, my phone rang. Mark Briggs. I answered. His voice didn't sound like the voice of the son I raised. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the quick, proud tone. Gone was the frustrated edge he carried whenever Hannah called. His voice shook. Dad? I straightened, leaning on the counter. The kids are okay, I said first. Mark didn't acknowledge it. He exhaled a sharp, uneven breath. Bring them to the airport, he said. I don't want to drive to Flagstaff. I frowned. Mark, where are you, Phoenix? I'm outside a room. A room whose room? Mark swallowed loud enough I heard it through the receiver. I can't go in. Hannah locked the door. A chill ran through me. I lowered my voice, the soldier in me rising to the surface. Mark, are you okay? He laughed. Not a real laugh. A broken, twisted sound. Okay, Dad. I don't even know anymore. Behind him, something slammed against a wall. A woman's voice shouted. I heard it even though Mark tried to talk over it. Why don't you just leave? You ruin everything, Hannah. Her voice sharp as shattered glass. Mark spoke again, barely above a whisper. Dad, Hannah says, you're the reason everything is falling apart. A silence followed. Long, heavy. I closed my eyes. Do you believe that I asked quietly? Mark didn't answer. But his silence was an answer. Before the weight of that could settle, a scream burst through the phone. Hannah again, Devin is coming back. You need to get out before he sees you. My eyes opened. Lily stared at me from across the room. She heard every word. Every word. Mark's voice turned frantic. Dad, I don't want to lose the kids. But I can't fix this life anymore. His voice cracked on the last word. A 38-year-old man breaking like a child. The door to Evan's room opened. He stepped out, eyes red. He had heard it all. I didn't speak. I let Mark hear his own shaking breath, because for the first time in years he wasn't pretending, wasn't acting tough, wasn't hiding behind Hannah's shadow. He admitted what he feared most. He was being torn apart, slowly, quietly, methodically. And the worst part, he had begun to believe that his failures were someone else's fault, my fault. A classic sign of manipulation. I spoke slowly, deliberately, Mark. Tell me the truth. Is someone threatening you? Mark didn't answer. He only breathed harder, like a man held underwater too long. Then I heard a key turn violently in the background. Mark choked out, Dad. I have to go. I don't know where this is heading. And the line went dead. Lily wrapped her arms around herself. Grandpa? What's happening to Dad? Evan stood stiffly, hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles blanched white. I didn't answer, because the answer, like every piece of evidence I'd uncovered, pointed to one conclusion. Hannah wasn't just having an affair. She and the man named Devin were breaking Mark down from the inside out. The Phoenix trip wasn't a romantic getaway. It was the beginning of a full collapse. But I didn't tell the kids that. I just looked at them. Lily, pale as snow, Evan trembling, Rowan asleep on the couch, and realized I was about to protect all four of them from a storm that had already started. And that storm was now very, very close. December 27th. Flagstaff was covered in a thin sheet of frost as if the entire neighborhood had been tucked under a cold white cloth. It wasn't the silence of Christmas anymore. It was the silence that follows a storm not fully gone, when everything bends a little, still holding the shape of last night's wind. I went to the garage early. The smell of oil and old wood blended together, familiar, almost comforting, like a second breath I didn't need to think about. I checked the little repairs I'd made on Rowan's toy car the night before. A simple task, but in this house it was one of the few things that still felt normal. I heard soft footsteps, small, but not Rowan's. Evan stood in the doorway of the garage. No headphones, no phone, no attitude. He just walked in, sat on the folding chair next to me, and stared at my toolbox in silence. After a long moment, he asked in a voice low and hoarse, nothing like a 15-year-old's voice, "Grandpa, if my dad did something wrong, would you still love him?" I put down the screwdriver. That wasn't a teenager's question. That was a human being bracing for the loss of his family. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate. Loving someone doesn't mean you ignore what they've done. And forgiving someone doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. Evan stared at the floor. He was trying to swallow a truth his body wasn't ready to hold. I added, "I love your dad, but I won't stand still and let anyone hurt you three." At that, Evan exhaled a long, shaky breath, the kind someone releases after holding pressure for far too long. He didn't talk more. He didn't need to. In his eyes, for the first time in years, there was a hint of trust. Not trust that things would get better, but trust that someone grown up wasn't going to abandon him. Inside the house, Lily sat on the living room floor, the iPad glowing in front of her. Its cold light washed over her pale face, pale not from exhaustion, but from fear. I stepped in quietly. She scrolled through picture after picture, photos automatically synced from her parents' iCloud. Photos of the resort room, bright white sheets, 2 glasses of wine, a dinner for 2 towels folded into swans. Then another photo, a rushed snapshot from Hannah, sent at 10:47 p.m., December 24th. Just wish things were easier. Her finger hovered before sliding to the next message. A text from Hannah. "I'm tired of him. I can't live like this." Lily froze. She didn't cry. She just lowered her head into her hands as if she needed to hold her skull together before it cracked apart. "Grandpa." Her voice was thin, like the sound of paper burning. "How long has my mom been like this?" I sat beside her. I didn't touch the iPad. I didn't pull it away. I let her face the truth at her own pace. "Lily," I said softly, "the truth doesn't make you weak. It shows you where you're standing." Her face twisted, not the way little kids cry, but the way people cry when they know there's no way back to the world they used to live in. "I don't want to hate my mom," she whispered. "I don't want to." I placed my hand gently on her back, light as a hand laid on cracked glass. "You don't have to choose hate or love. You only have to choose truth." It was something Carol once told me when Mark was small. Now I was giving that back to Lily. Meanwhile, Rowan discovered the truth in another way. Accidental, but just as brutal. As I cleaned the living room, he sat watching the Nest Cam recordings, the motion-triggered clips from the front porch. I reached over to turn it off. Rowan grabbed my sleeve. "Grandpa, watch this." And there she was. Hannah. Not the warm mother, not the Christmas parent, not someone cherishing her kids. A woman shoving her children into my house like 3 unwanted packages. No greeting, no goodbye, not even a glance back. She pushed Evan forward, pulled Lily by the shoulder when the girl hesitated, lifted Rowan off the ground and set him down like an object. Then she ran. Actually ran. Back to the SUV. Slammed the door. Drove off fast. Rowan watched the clip. then said a single sentence, a sentence that fractured something deep inside me. She didn't even look at me. I knelt, pulled him close. In my arms, he whispered low but certain. At home, every day is like that. No screaming, no crying, no blame, just truth. And children, they always tell the truth in the way that hurts adults the most. That evening when I set dinner on the table, I prepared myself for complaints like every night before. Evan hated vegetables. Lily wanted food like the restaurant. Rowan usually begged for dessert. But that night, no complaints, no rolled eyes, no plates pushed away. Evan sat beside me voluntarily. Lily pulled her chair closer, not out of affection, but out of wanting not to be alone. Rowan folded his arms on the table and watched me like he was waiting for something safe to begin. Not one of them said a negative word about the food. 3 children, each carrying their own kind of grief, all came to the same adult they felt safest with. I looked at them. I said nothing. But in that silence, something unspoken took shape. A vow sharp as steel. They had chosen truth. And I alone would stand in front of them and take the blow from whatever truth came next, even if it cut through everything in its path. Morning of December 28th. Flagstaff still looked like the morning after a storm, white, silent, cold, sharp as a pen hovering over a verdict not yet read. I drove toward downtown to Attorney Rachel O'Connell's small office in an old red brick building, its roof lined with a thin crust of ice. I didn't drink my morning coffee. Didn't feel hungry. All I felt was something I hadn't felt since my days in uniform, that cold, lucid clarity right before a major confrontation. Rachel opened the door. "Earl, come in." Her voice was steady, the kind of steadiness that makes people believe in the law, even when their lives are falling apart. Her office was small, but arranged like a tactical room wooden desk, regional map pinned to the wall, a bookshelf, and a large window overlooking the frozen street. No rug, no warm decor, no distractions. You walked into her office to find solutions, not comfort. I placed the envelope on her desk. It hit with a weight that made the wood thump. "This is everything I've got," I said. Rachel opened it. She reviewed each item with the calm precision of a surgeon reading a CT scan. No emotion, no assumption, only analysis. Evidence 1. The child abandonment video. Doorbell camera footage. Hannah shoving Evan toward my doorway, pulling Lily by the shoulder when she hesitated, dropping Rowan so fast he nearly fell. No goodbye. No Merry Christmas. No hesitation. Just a woman ejecting her own children from the chaos of her life. Rachel paused the video. Her expression darkened. This is clear neglect. Evidence 2. The resort photos. A double room lit with warm yellow light. 2 wine glasses. A man's shirt thrown on the chair, not Mark's. Rachel zoomed in. "This confirms a third party," she said. "She left the kids to spend time with someone else." Her tone wasn't judgment. It was confirmation. Evidence 3. The affair emails Phoenix Desert Resort. 2 adults. Guest Hannah Briggs, and the synced iMessage below. "Can't wait for tonight. Devin Hayes." Rachel nodded. Not just an affair. This is proof she intended to be with another man during the exact hours the children were abandoned. Evidence 4. The financial records, $820 spent on a couple spa package. Card declined. Overdraft fee. Transaction repeated at 1 a.m. Rachel frowned. This shows serious financial instability. If Hannah and this Devin are accessing Mark's cards, you have grounds for a financial protection order to safeguard the kids. She scribbled notes quickly like a soldier marking coordinates. Evidence 5. The Texas travel booking. January 19th. 2 adults, no children. Booked by Hannah. Additional traveler, Devin Hayes. No Mark. No Evan, Lily, or Rowan. Rachel looked up slowly. This is intent to leave the state, she said, possibly to abandon Mark, or to relocate without the children. In some cases, this can be seen as preliminary grounds for parental kidnapping. My grip tightened on the chair. This was no longer speculation. It was a map of destruction. Rachel gathered all the papers into a neat stack, a battle file. Earl, you understand what this means, right? I understand. She pushed the file toward me. This is enough to request emergency custody. I exhaled, not in relief, but in acceptance. The kind of acceptance soldiers feel when they know there's no going back. Paul's report. Rachel pulled another document from a separate folder. Paul sent this over this morning. I nodded. Paul, the police chief, was my old friend from Fort Sill, the man who pulled me out of a booby trap blast. If Paul sent a report, it was truth carved in stone. Rachel read aloud domestic disturbance report. Mark and Hannah, November 18th. Neighbors reported shouting, objects breaking. Mark seen with bruising on his arm. No arrest made because he insisted everything was fine. Rachel placed the report down. Victims of manipulation always say that. I looked at the hardwood floor. Mark, the boy who once laughed on my shoulders, had sunk so deep he couldn't recognize harm when it had a name. Then Rachel slid a thin document toward me, a piece of paper but heavy as a rifle. Temporary emergency custody order, 72 hours. 4 names printed clearly. Earl Simmons, Evan Briggs, Lily, Briggs, Rowan, Briggs. Sign here, Rachel said. This isn't punishment, it's protection. I picked up the pen. The tip touched the page. In that quiet, sharp memories cut through Rowan, whispering, Grandpa, is Dad mad at you? Lily staring at her parents' wedding photo, whispering, do they still love each other? Evan shaking when he saw the affair emails. I signed. My signature didn't tremble, but my heart felt like it had taken on lead. Rachel gathered the papers immediately. I'll file this within 2 hours. Once the judge signs, you have full legal right to keep the children. No one, not Hannah, not Mark, can remove them. I nodded. She met my eyes. Earl, sometimes protecting the children is the only way to save the father, too. I stood, pulled on my coat, and opened the door. Outside, the wind rose like a distant roar. Something was coming. A storm, not of nature, but of human choices. And for the first time in years, I was ready to walk straight into it, not to fight, but to protect. The afternoon of December 28th hung low over Flagstaff, a sky smeared in ash gray, the kind of sky that warns you a second blizzard is waiting behind the mountains for the right moment to strike. I was preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. Not once, not twice, but in a frantic pounding rhythm that sounded like someone on the edge of collapse. I opened the door. Mark stood there. No coat, hair a tangled mess, beard unshaven, eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept in days or hadn't stopped crying long enough to try. Bring them home, he said. His voice was cracked, scraped raw. There was no authority in it, no pride, no trace of the father who once lifted Lily and Evan on his shoulders and spun them around the kitchen just to hear them laugh. I looked past him. His car was parked crooked across my driveway, back door ajar, his suitcase tossed sideways in the back seat, as if he'd thrown it there while running. Something inside him had snapped. Kids are upstairs, I said quietly. Sit down first. He stumbled into the house like a man walking through the aftershock of an explosion. I motioned for the kids to go upstairs. Evan took Lily's hand and guided her into the hallway. Rowan ran up the stairs but paused halfway, looking at Mark with fear and pity. That look alone made Mark flinch. He saw it. He felt it. He realized his own child was afraid of him. I closed the door behind us. I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. I placed the folder of evidence on the wooden coffee table, the same table where Carol used to lay out tax forms each winter. What's this? Mark asked. The truth, I said. I slid the folder toward him. Mark opened it, piece by piece, page by page. A slow unraveling of every hidden corner of the life Hannah had been living behind his back. The resort receipt, 2 adults. The photos of a double bed. The message, "Can't wait for tonight. Devin Hayes." The doorbell video of Hannah shoving the kids into my house and driving away. The Texas reservation. The domestic dispute report from November. I watched him. His face went from red to gray to pale white. His lips trembled, but no words came. Finally he whispered, "Broken, Dad. What are you doing?" It wasn't anger. It was terror. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. "This is what you and Hannah did," I said. "Not what I did." Mark slammed his hand on the table. I didn't know she was doing this." I stared back steady, unwavering. "You knew she was unhappy. You knew the fighting was getting worse. But you didn't look. You didn't listen. And you didn't protect your kids." Mark staggered back a step, as if I'd struck him straight in the chest. At that exact moment, the living room door opened. Rachel O'Connell stepped out. My attorney. Her voice was cool, sharp as steel. "Mark Briggs." Mark spun around, startled. Rachel held up a document stamped in red ink. "This is a temporary emergency custody order, 72 hours, effective immediately." Mark blinked rapidly. "What, Dad? You got a lawyer? To take my kids away from me?" Rachel didn't flinch. "No one is taking anything from you. We're preventing you from taking the children somewhere unsafe." Mark lunged forward. Instinct, not intention, but a deep voice cut through the room. "Mark, stop. Paul, the police chief." My old friend, my brother from Fort Sill, stood at the front door in uniform, hand resting near his duty belt, calm but ready. Mark looked at Rachel, then at Paul, then at me. The three of us formed a silent perimeter. Not violent, but immovable. "You are not allowed to remove the children from this home," Paul said. "The order has been signed. I'm here to ensure it is followed." Mark inhaled sharply, his voice breaking apart. "They're my kids. I'm their father." "Being a father," I said softly, "doesn't mean you get to do anything you want." Mark's fist tightened until the knuckles turned white. Then he bolted, straight up the stairs. "Mark, don't," I shouted, but he was already inside Rowan's room, lifting the boy into his arms so abruptly that Rowan cried out in fear. "Come on, buddy. Come with Daddy." Mark gasped, breathless. I ran after him. Paul followed close behind. Rachel stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching every detail. Mark pushed toward the back door child in his arms, panic driving him like a cornered animal. Paul's voice thundered. "Sir, put the child down. Now!" Mark froze. And I saw it for the first time in years. His eyes weren't angry, weren't defiant, weren't stubborn. They were terrified, shattered, lost. Rowan sobbed, small hands gripping Mark's neck but not hugging because he didn't understand what was happening. Mark looked at his child, then at me. And suddenly he wasn't 38 anymore. He was 8. Standing in the doorway before I left for deployment asking Daddy, "You're coming back, right?" Mark trembled. Then he lowered Rowan to the floor. Not dropped him, not forced, just lowered him like something precious he no longer trusted himself to hold. Rowan ran to me. I lifted him, my arms steady the same way I once lifted Mark after his very first fall on his very first bike. Mark collapsed onto the chair. Not a sound. Not a fight. Not a word. Just collapsed. Bone deep. Soul deep. As if his entire life had finally caught up to him. Rachel whispered beside me, "You did the right thing, Earl." Paul loosened his stance, voice gentler. "Mark, you need help. And this is us giving you that chance." Mark didn't answer. He just covered his face with both hands. And I stood there holding Rowan, watching my grown son crumble, and realizing that for the first time, Mark wasn't choosing Hannah. He wasn't choosing denial. He wasn't choosing to run. He was choosing the truth, even though the truth was tearing him apart from the inside out. December 29th. Flagstaff woke under a sky that looked clean bright but cold enough to cut. Like the sun only rose to expose the truth, not to warm anyone. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. A video call. Hannah Briggs. Her name lit up the screen like a bloodstain on fresh snow. I didn't want to answer. But in family wars, silence is ammunition for the enemy, so I took the call. The screen flicked on. Hannah appeared in a hotel room, hair messy, eyes red, but mouth curled into an ugly, furious smile. "What have you done with my kids?" she screamed. "You're keeping them from me, trying to ruin my marriage. You just can't stand Mark having a life without you." Her voice tore through the speaker like metal scraping against a door frame. I didn't raise mine. "Hannah," I said calmly, "no one is hurting you. I'm protecting the children." That set her off like a match to gasoline. "You have no right. They belong with their mother. You're old, useless, and—" A door upstairs opened. Evan. He stood there, eyes fixed on the screen, hearing every word she threw at me. No tears, no yelling, just trembling, the kind of shaking that comes when the truth is finally louder than every lie you've been fed. I switched the call off speaker, held the phone close, but Evan had heard enough. He stepped backward into his room and closed the door. For the first time since he'd arrived, he didn't try to be strong. Hannah kept going, voice shrill and cracking. "I'm calling my lawyer. I'm suing you. I cut in, voice low. "Steady, Hannah. There's already a temporary order. You can't take the kids anywhere." Her face froze. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "Where's Mark?" I asked. She scoffed a bitter laugh. "He's weak, jealous of everything I do. He can't handle me having a better life than him." And in that moment, something clicked. Hannah didn't fear losing Mark. She didn't fear losing the children. She feared losing control. Control over the story. Control over the chaos. Control over the people she'd been twisting for years. She hissed, "You'll pay for this." Then she hung up. Silence dropped into my kitchen like snow hitting a tin roof. Soft, cold, final. Rowan came down first. Wrinkled pajamas, hair ruffled, bare feet on a freezing floor. "Grandpa," he grabbed my hand, voice small. "I don't want to go back there." I lifted him. He rested his head on my shoulder the same way Mark used to before the world hardened him. No child should ever have to say that. But Rowan said it with a truth you can't argue with. Lily followed. Quiet. Expression tight and far too old for her age. She held a photo Mark at 8 years old on my shoulders, laughing with his whole face. "Grandpa." She held it out. "Can I keep this?" I nodded. "Yes, Lily." She looked at that picture for a long time, her thumb tracing the boy her father used to be, a boy she'd never known. This wasn't a tantrum, wasn't drama. It was the collapse of trust in a child who'd held on too long. Then late afternoon, Mark appeared. He didn't knock, just walked in like a man blown into my doorway by the wind. Jacket wrinkled, eyes red, breath heavy. "Dad, I need to talk." I sent the kids upstairs. Mark looked around the quiet house, the safety, the warmth, all the things he hadn't given his children in years. He sat, hands over his face. "I don't know what I've become," he said, voice cracking. "I was scared I'd turn into you. Scared I'd lose my wife, my kids, my life." He swallowed hard. "But somehow, I ruined it worse than you ever did." I sat across from him, not touching, not comforting with lies, just truth. "You're not afraid of becoming me," I said. "You're afraid of seeing yourself clearly." The words hit him like a body blow. He sucked in a shaky breath. "I want to fix this, but I don't know where to start." I took out the paper Rachel gave me that morning, a list of counselors who specialize in domestic manipulation trauma. "Start here." Mark held the paper. His fingers trembled. "I'll go," he whispered. Not to make up for anything. I asked quietly, "Then why?" He looked at the floor. Voice barely there. "To admit I failed." He said it like a man placing a cornerstone to rebuild a bridge he burned himself. He stood up weak. "Dad, I want you to take care of the kids for now. I need to fix me first." I nodded, not triumphant, not proud, because this wasn't victory, this was survival. That night I walked past the kids' rooms. Evan sitting against the wall, eyes steadier than yesterday. Lily asleep clutching the photo of Mark as a child. Rowan buried under blankets holding on to his first peaceful night in years. None of them said a word, but their choice was louder than anything spoken. They chose me. They chose safety. They chose truth. They chose the home their parents couldn't give them. And I knew tomorrow Hannah would come back swinging, with lawyers, with threats, with fury. But this time I wasn't facing her alone. I had 3 children behind me, and for the first time ever, my son was standing beside me. December 30th, 2024. The morning in Flagstaff was so cold the air turned to white smoke the second I opened the door. But inside the house, it was warmer than any winter I could remember. I stood in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner. Not a feast, not a Christmas spread filled with fanfare. Just roasted chicken potatoes, a little bit of greens, the things Carol used to make during the years when our family still held together. Things that gave this house a scent again. A scent of family, even if that family now looked very different. I didn't ask the kids to help, but when I turned around, Evan was already setting the bowls. Lily placed the forks and knives with careful precision. Rowan pulled out the chairs, concentrating hard as if it were the most important mission of his life. No orders, no instructions, just a rhythm they seemed ready to follow at last. Around 3 p.m., Mark returned. Snow still clung to his coat, but his face? Lighter, as if he'd finally put down something that had dragged him under for years. "Dad." He held out an envelope. "I filed my counseling paperwork. Rachel said the court sees that as a good first step." I opened the envelope. A certificate confirming he'd begun therapy. Appointment scheduled through January 2025. His signature at the bottom, shaky but real. Not an apology, not an attempt to win anyone back. Responsibility. Rachel entered through the back door, snow dusting her black coat. "Hannah has been ordered to appear on January 3rd, she said. "The main custody hearing will be late January. With the evidence we have, Earl, your chances of securing safe custody are very high." Mark sank onto the long bench, hands knitted together. "I'm not asking the court to bring the kids back to me," he said quietly. "Not until I'm sure I can be a father, without hurting anyone again." It was the first time he said it without trembling. Evening fell. Snow settled in thin layers across the porch rail. Wind swept over the roof, making the same sound it used to when Carol was alive, sitting in that old chair knitting, telling me family isn't the place where we're perfect. It's the place where we're allowed to fix what we broke. I looked toward the dining table. Mark was helping Evan pour water. Lily was smoothing the tablecloth to fit the corners exactly right. Rowan was circling the table, giggling as he counted chairs. I stood there holding a hot pan and felt something tighten in my chest. Something I thought had died nearly a year ago. The warmth of a real home. Not a perfect home. A home with the right people in it. We sat down for dinner. No one talked much. Then Evan spoke first, the boy, who had been silent the longest. "Grandpa, are you going to eat with us?" I froze for half a heartbeat. Not because I was surprised, but because that question hit the hollow place I had carried inside me for 12 months. I nodded. Rowan grinned. Lily looked at me without suspicion for the first time. And Mark, he looked up. No smile, no tears. Just the expression of a man who finally understood what I had tried to say all those years ago. Family is not who gets it right. Family is who stays when everything else falls apart. I sat down. The late Christmas lights outside glowed across the snow, casting warm gold onto the white porch, like a small reminder. Some holidays arrive late. But if they arrive to the right people, they are still holidays. I took a breath and spoke the truth I had waited all year to say. I didn't punish my son. I saved 3 children from something their father could never escape from on his own. And then to the listeners, to the people who know this kind of story far too well, I said, if you're hearing this, whether you're in your kitchen, in your car, or in a quiet room you thought you'd been left alone in, I want you to know this. Your silence has value. Your sacrifices were not invisible, and the truth will always find its way to the light. If you've ever spent years misunderstood, dismissed, spoken over, belittled, tell your story in the comments. Share what you survived, because sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to speak, or brave enough to stand still for the truth to shine on its own. If this story found you at the right moment, if you've ever lived through a silence that nobody understood or carried a weight that nobody thanked you for, don't leave just yet. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what part of this story stayed with you the most. Click. Like it tells YouTube, this story mattered. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their voice. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because healing doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it happens one chapter at a time. And if you've ever been told you're invisible, stay with us. Here your story is seen, your